Welcome to the VO School podcast, dedicated to the art, craft, and business of voiceover. Each week builds upon the last to give you a comprehensive understanding of a career in VO. My name's Jamie Moffat. I'm a full-time voice talent and audio engineer, and I'll be joined by some of the industry's top professionals on both sides of the microphone to drill down and dig up the truth. Hello, welcome to the VO School podcast. We are up to episode 21, and thank you to everyone that's listened. Thank you to everyone that sent us messages and retweeted everything from our last episode, our celebration of reaching episode 20 and our Black History Month episode, and that's been very well received, so thank you for that. Today, however, we are talking to Joe Cipriano, and he is a promo voiceover legend, and he is one of the biggest promo voices in this country, therefore probably the world, and he's been at this for a long time. He didn't start out in promo, he started out in radio at an extremely early age, and you'll hear about that in a little while. But before we get there, I want to remind everyone that you can connect with us on social media, and to get all the links for all those places, just visit voschoolpodcast.com, and you'll find links for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all that stuff, so please connect there. Otherwise, that's pretty much it, so let's have a short ad break, and we'll be right back.
Coming up next on the VO School podcast, promo maestro and all-around good guy Joe Cipriano shares his stories on life in voiceover. That's next.
The National Zoo. Because sometimes you just need to stroke a llama.
Instagram. Download it and start embarrassing your teenagers today.
Resolve spot and stain. Because the dog's gonna drag his butt on the carpet. He just is.
Engage the droid army with this LEGO Star Wars Republic fighter tank.
Hi, it's J. Michael Collins, and these are just a few examples of the first-class demos my team and I are producing. If you'd like to have something similar, visit jmcvoiceover.com and click on the Demo Production tab to find out more.
Okay, so today I am joined by promo maestro, Joe Cipriano. So Joe, thanks for joining us.
Wow, maestro, I've not heard that before, Jamie. I'm honored. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
you are. I think that's a fair enough description of what you do. So first of all, I want to get a bit of backstory. So why don't you tell us how you got started, when you got started, how old you were, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I actually started in radio. And radio was my day job, for a number of years. I started in radio at the age of 14 in Waterbury, Connecticut. I grew up in a small town called Oakville, Connecticut, and called my local DJ one day when I was 14. It was the summertime of in between, in 14, I think I was maybe a sophomore or freshman. I think I was a freshman in high school. Yeah. And he was kind enough to let me come down to the station, and I'd never seen one before, and I caught that bug, and, I would go every weekend to do anything, file records in the library, the music library, or go out and get sandwiches for the on-air personalities. And so my radio career kind of grew, and I went full-time when I was 16, and I was a junior in high school, going to school during the day, and I had a radio show at night, 6 to 10 at night, and would do my homework while the records were spinning. And I graduated. They moved me to afternoons, which was great. And from there, I worked in Hartford. I worked in Waterbury. I got a great job offer in Washington, D.C. Went there working for NBC, the youngest on-air radio personality they had ever hired. Oh, wow. I was just 19, and met my future wife there on her first day at NBC. She was a news writer on the AM, and I was a on-air personality on the FM, and that was 76. We got married in 79, and by the end of 1980, we went to Los Angeles to pursue our careers, hers in broadcasting TV as a news writer and producer, and now Emmy Award winner. And I went to L.A. to work in radio and pursue voiceovers. I had started voiceovers in D.C. and worked for a very cool agency, the Denneberg Agency, Elliot Denneberg, and did a lot of really cool spots, kind of regional spots for classy department stores and things like that. Later on in life, I learned that Elliot Denneberg, who had hired me so many times, is the father of Laurie Allen, who is a voiceover artist and a friend of mine in L.A. So hilarious. That was a crazy thing to find out.
Yeah, and, it comes full circle.
Yeah, really, it's quite amazing. And I went to L.A. to pursue voiceovers and use radio as my day gig, and I was very, very fortunate in that way.
So what was the initial inspiration at 14 to call up your local radio station and want to work there? Was that something that you listened to under the covers at night,
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I was a big, they used to call that DXing, AM radios at night. They just keep bouncing off the ionosphere and go for hundreds and hundreds of miles. I used to listen to Super CFL out of Chicago and WLS and CKLW out of Detroit and late at night and think, God, I would love to work in one of those cities and do that. And I guess I gravitated to radio. I had this as a kid at maybe 13, 14, that I wanted to be on television. I wanted to be an actor, be in a sitcom, do something. And I thought the path would be radio. And, to a certain extent, that has happened in the past. And it's happened for people like Howard Stern and certainly Ryan Seacrest. And so it was, it's like, okay, I could do this, and I love it, and let's see where it brings me. And gosh, I have done some on-camera stuff, but, when the focus became voiceover, it was like, okay, this is what I really, really love.
Right,
and promos, especially. I just got, to start to hear these guys, back in the 80s, like Ernie Anderson at ABC, The Love Boat, and Danny Dark at NBC. And I thought, wow, what a gig to vocally represent a television network. And so that was a focus for me.
So what do you think are those transferable skills from radio that you learned all those years back that you use today? Are there still any that linger, do you think?
It's amazing. And, I teach, I do coaching and produce promo demos and other demos for talent. But the thing I talk about a lot when I'm working with maybe doing a promo masterclass with voiceover talent is, number one, the skill of timing is so important in promos and especially network promos, because the way we do it at the networks at ABC, NBC, Fox, CBS, etc., we're the last thing to go in. The voice is the last. Yeah. The creative is done. They've viewed the show, decided how they're going to market the show, cut the spots. It goes through revisions. And finally, after it's been approved, it gets down into audio. And then that's when they book us to voice the promos. And so we're reading to picture. If you're on IPDTL or Source Connect or ISDN, you're not seeing picture, but you're still reading to the finished product. So you're weaving in and out of SOTs, sound on tape.
Yeah.
And there are 3 beeps at the top, and you begin, Sunday on an all-new blah, blah, and then there's SOT, and then you're back in and you're back out. And it's that timing that I learned in radio is so important, and it's so great to have in your hip pocket. You don't have to worry about the timing aspect of it. It gives you the ability to concentrate on what you're going to do with the words. Because no matter what, you're still telling a story. Even if it's 10 seconds, 15, 20, or 30 seconds, there's still an arc. There's a story arc, and you're still, telling that story.
And so the pressure of radio is great because it's live, of course. But if you're reading to picture, there's a certain pressure there as well, isn't it? Like you say, you have the sound ups and all that kind of stuff. You have to hit your mark. So I can definitely see how that transfers.
Yeah, it is. I mean, in the back of your mind that, okay, we have a second try on this, but it's a challenge for yourself, as a professional that you want to try to nail it as quickly as possible. And, truthfully, the networks, especially during sweeps, they could be cranking out 300 versions, 300 promos, because you've got for example, if it's a Monday show, you got a Monday, you got a tonight, you got a mix, you've got a next maybe, you've got a tomorrow version. So for every spot you do, there's maybe 3 or 4 other versions, and they have to mix those out. So that's a lot of spots in a day at a single network. So time is of the essence. They want you to read it, get it right, do it awesome, and be done in 2 takes, and then let's pick up tags and move on.
Yeah, right. So how do TV promos and radio promos differ? I mean, obviously you're not doing it to picture. I mean, how is the approach the same?
I think the creative is different because when the writer producer is formulating what they are going to do with an episode of a show, and they're doing it for on air, so it's video. They have that luxury of the video supporting what they're writing, and it helps drive the story and move the story, create the story. And then, of course, in radio, you don't have the luxury of any sort of visuals. You're only working with audio. So it's an entirely different creative process. Some networks will kind of, they'll take their TV spots and then they'll rewrite the same idea, the same creative, and turn it into a radio spot. But most of the people I've worked with, people like Eric Poole and, oh gosh, so many others at CBS, they kind of throw out, forget what TV has done, what on air has done on the radio side. They'll watch the episode and go about creating, what their story is going to be. Yeah, and so it's entirely different, and the read is different as well. More copy in a radio spot. Mm-hmm. You're driving it a little bit more, whereas in the on air, maybe you're playing off video sometimes, and maybe you're saying something that's, kind of ironic, when you compare it to what the visual is. Yeah. You're hitting graphics. Radio, you're not hitting graphics. So it's just important in radio to have a really clear story and an understanding of, okay, what's the information we're trying to impart to the audience.
I would definitely recommend listeners check out footage of you working on YouTube. It's really, really interesting. There's shots of you, and obviously the camera's just looking at you, and you're absorbed by what you're watching on screen, and you're doing it live. I'm interested to hear your creative process what goes on in your brain as you're watching something and making choices based on the script and based on what's happening on screen. I mean, is there any way you can paint that picture for us?
Well, I think that all of us are hired. When you get up to the network level of promos, you're being hired to do what you do. So if they're going to place me on a show, they want me to do what they are familiar with. And so I know that at least I've got that going for me. I know that what I'm going to do is kind of what they're looking for. Yeah. And then individually at each promo, you look for, I have to admit, it's just so much fun. I'm just looking for opportunities where I can do something that's just a little bit different, a little bit special. Yeah. A turn of a phrasing is so, incredibly important. Yeah. But it's that first run when you haven't seen the spot. The script was really just handed to you 30 seconds ago, and you have a quick look at it, and the 3 beeps start, and you're exploring from that moment on, from the next 30 seconds. It's like, how much time do I have here? Oh, that's the visual that goes with that line. I see. Oh, okay. I know what I can do with that. I mean, it's a process of it's a learning process, and at the same time, it's this. You see all these new opportunities, and many times you'll come up with 2 or 3 different ways that you can read a phrase or do the overall, and they're always up for that. We'll do one, and that's mostly for timing. Okay, got the timing now. And then you do the next one, and the third one is like, how about if we try this? Are we up for this? And they might cherry pick, and take, top 2 lines from the second take and the middle line from the third take, and then boom, and then move on. So it's truly exploring and fun.
Yeah.
Just looking where you can do something a little bit special.
It sounds like there's more freedom in promo than there would be in, say, a commercial session.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's in the commercial world, and I don't do a lot of commercial work because, I do a lot of promo work. And so, I might not sound like somebody's father or grandfather. Ann and I, my wife and I were just in Orlando visiting friends and also our niece and nephew. And we were at Orlando Airport and at Enterprise. Yeah. And we were walking out to the car, and they always greet you. Somebody greets you to walk you to the car. And I said, hi, they told me that we have a one car grade upgrade. And she said, oh, really? And then she turned to me and she goes, anybody ever tell you sound like you're on the radio? So, you have, I just kind of have that. And that's why maybe I don't do a lot of commercial work unless they're looking for something specifically, like that.
Yeah.
When they go to do a record for a voice or a number of voices for commercial, that creative has lasted maybe weeks and maybe a month in developing that. Whereas in promo, they've only got a day, to create what they're doing. So there's been a lot of input and a lot of people, and several of them show up at the session. So everybody has their own idea. And it can be a long session, and that's why those studios are the ones that have the kitchens, because you're going to be there for breakfast and lunch, and you might even be there at dinner. Not necessarily the talent, but the folks from the ad agency will be there. So, and they have specific ideas of what they want,
right?
Which is good.
Yeah, exactly, and they can get really super granular with emphasis of certain syllables and things like that, and then waiting for sign off and all that. We've all been there.
Yes.
So when you were coming up, I want to explore that a little bit. Did you have mentors that helped you throughout your career? Obviously, you coach now. So do you think back now to people that were instrumental in how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I always, I mentioned Ernie Anderson and Danny Dark. Ernie, I met and actually worked alongside for a while there at the end of his time at ABC. And I was doing Saturday morning, the cartoons, doing promos for that. And I got to sit in his chair. Talk about YouTube videos. If you look up Ernie Anderson at ABC, that's a ride.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Ernie is the guy who, the reason why we use the Sennheiser 416 microphone goes back to Ernie Anderson, because Ernie, quick story, refused to go into the booth. He liked to have control. He didn't like the fact that if he's in the booth, he can't hear what's going on in the control room unless they press a button.
Yeah.
So he was very strong in saying that I'm not going in there, and I'm sitting right here. And so they had a challenge there, because we're reading the picture, and we've got the guy in the room with us.
Yeah.
We have to hear what's going on. So someone along the way said, why don't we try this 416 that we use as a boom mic? It's extremely directional, and it'll cancel out, room noise. And nobody worked it up close like this. A 416 is usually, 10 feet away from you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that cool qualities that this microphone picks up, which have become the standard for promo. So, watching guys like Ernie and learning about the business, I was really fortunate early on when we first moved to Los Angeles. Somehow I made a connection with a writer-producer at CBS, and he allowed me to come in and sit in the booth and watch what happens in a promo session, and that was unbelievable. That was like, talk about master classes.
Yeah.
I learned everything there. And then as a mentor and close friend, Danny Dark from NBC. Danny was incredible talent. And during his reign at NBC, which was about 15 years, he did everything. When I'm at Fox or CBS, I was the comedy voice, or when I went to NBC, I was the drama voice. But in those days, those network voices did the comedies, the dramas, the reality, the live shows. They just were on everything because they were imaging the network itself. And Danny was such a good friend and such a great support. And I learned so much from him and owe him a lot. So I always think very fondly of Danny. Have a lot of great stories just traveling around with Danny. He was something else. And back in the day, besides just being a network voice for NBC, he was the voice of Budweiser. He was the voice of Chicken of the Sea Tuna. He just Keebler cookies. He just had this unbelievable career and a wonderful voice that eventually went out of style, and he wasn't being used as much, and that was it was difficult for him to handle, but he did, and I think even when he wasn't working that much anymore, he took up piano and he played his trumpet more and traveled a lot with his wife Jo B, and so he found new ways. So he taught me that as well, because it is inevitable. Everything ends, and you can continue to work, and maybe you won't be able to work at a certain level. I'm very fortunate where I am and where I have been. But at some point, the new talent has to take over. And not only that, it's just a change, in pop culture and a change in how you market things and what's current. So you have to be a student of what's happening so that you can keep up. And I've always done that. But it is inevitable. And it happened. And Danny taught me that as well, that will happen at some time. And be able to roll with it.
I mean, I know you're still very much at the top of your game, but how much does passing on the flame to the next generation play into what you do now? I know you do coaching as well. Is that important to you?
Yeah. I learned early on from Don LaFontaine, who was a great friend. Don used to do these ride-alongs. He would invite voiceover talent to go along with him. Don used to go from session to session in a limousine. And
I've seen the video.
And he would invite voiceover talent that he would meet or that his agent had met, or and say, "Why don't you come along with me tomorrow? Meet me at Tischerman's office, his agent, and you'll come along for a day and talk about a master class. Learning at the foot of Don LaFontaine, and just spending a day at he would go to a myriad of studios and every network. I would see him in the morning at Fox and see him in the afternoon at CBS, and in between at a vendor, like Woodholly or something like that. So I learned from Don, and after Don passed, his friend Paul Pape said we really need to do something to honor Don, and we had a few different ideas, but it was actually Paul who said, how about a voiceover lab where voiceover talent can come and free of charge, just learn the craft. We'll build state-of-the-art studios. And we started riffing off of that. And we went to a few different places to try to help us with this funding. And we landed at the Screen Actors Guild Foundation. And they embraced it. And they said, listen, if you can come up with about $40,000 to start us off, we'll start doing fundraising and we'll allocate funds, and we'll go after some grants and things like that. And that's all I needed to know. That was on Friday. I started calling people like Scott Rummel and, oh my gosh, all the Stu Herrera, voiceover artists, and saying, listen, we need can you kick in $1,000 or $5,000? And I think we had $50,000 or $60,000 by Monday. So it was very easy to do that. And if that list of names, which is on the SAG Foundation website, if you go to the Don LaFontaine Voiceover Lab website at the SAG Foundation, you'll see all of our members who stood up and paid the cold hard cash and made the commitment, and they teach there free of charge. And we have 2 beautiful state-of-the-art studios. And then recently we opened a lab in New York City as well at the SAG Foundation. So that's good. And then I learned from there, and that's when I thought, maybe there is something that, even though I don't fancy myself a director, or that hands-on kind of coaching, I think I can do something to help talent and really embrace that. And that's what led to, doing the coaching that I do and going out. I love going out to conferences and doing promo sessions and having people read to picture. It's fun and it's informative and it puts them in a real world situation. And then I love working with people and helping them with their careers and how to grow their careers. So I go back to people like Don and Danny Dark, who did it for me, who kind of laid the foundation for me.
I'm interested to hear what you think about the way that things change stylistically. You mentioned a little while ago about how your voice can maybe slip out of the vogue of what's happening at the time. So how much is promo affected by that? Is it sort of at the same rate as maybe the commercial world or things like that? And how much can you do to roll with those changes?
Yeah, I think that, definitely promo does evolve and change. And, I've worked on that over and over and over, for years and years, and reinvented myself at least 2-3 times. And you always have to be open to that. I think it's a matter of, as I said earlier, being a student of the art and know what's going on, paying attention, understanding who's getting booked and why, and how is marketing changing. It's an interesting thing that we do in promo where it's a creative, aspect to promo and as a talent. Yeah. But then at the same time, it's really true marketing. It's really selling a product. Yeah, and understanding that as well. So it does. Promo changes all the time. Take a listen to the ABC voices. I love what they're doing there. ABC every once in a while will do a throwback and have somebody that sounds like Andy Geller, who used to be the big deep ABC voice, just to throw in a little Wayback Machine,
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's fun to follow and it's challenging, to keep up. But that's part of the gig.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe if your voice isn't currently in vogue, it may come back around. Just have to wait it out. So I want to get into the nuts and bolts of a typical day for you. How does it work? How do you work with the networks and things like that? And how does your day flow?
Networks usually are a little later in the day. I'm on the East Coast right now, which makes it a little difficult because a 6 p.m. West Coast session is suddenly 9 o'clock here. And I've had plenty of those. But the way I structure my day is I do a lot of radio imaging because I came from radio and I enjoy doing that. And I like to keep it up. So I think I have about 26 radio stations that I do. And most of those, the scripts can come in throughout the day and I can knock them out whenever. But usually I'll take care of all of the radio stuff in the morning. Yeah. I'll have some other, maybe like an ESPN session, which would be a 9 a.m. session. That's an East Coast booking, and that would be 9 o'clock on the West Coast that I'd be doing that. Yeah. So I do all of that during the morning hours, and then the networks usually kick in around noon or 1 West Coast time, and it's just because they're reviewing what they have morning meetings. They review what they did yesterday. They decide if they need to make any changes in the spots that were read and finished, and they may have to go back into audio and do a couple of changes. Sometimes it's just video changes or a remix, and sometimes it's a reread, and maybe not the entire spot, but a portion of it. Maybe they did a quick little rewrite. And once they do that, then they're getting into doing the creative for the new stuff that has to be read. So then they're not really ready until 2, 3, 4, 5 to be able to read those kind of spots.
And this is for spots that are airing that evening?
No, they would at the earliest would air the next day.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty quick turnaround.
It is because, after we do our thing, we read, then it has to be mixed, and then it goes off to high res, and then high res, puts in the graphics and the back plates, all those pretty colors and pictures at the end of a promo, and they may a lot of the graphics in the middle of the promo might be roughed in, and they do the finish, the high-res finish.
Right.
So all of that, the high-res room can work very late at night, and get it all turned around and ready for network use, and also they go, they go out to the affiliates so that they can run the network promos during the day, during their programming that's not being generated by the network.
Right.
They maybe are running syndicated things, or they have their own live stuff that they're doing local.
Right. So why don't you explain now the sort of technical process with how you work? Obviously record from home. You're not going into studios, or predominantly, I assume that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll contact you and say, we want to have you work on this spot for blah, 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 ESPN. They'll send you the script. I mean, how much time do you have to sort of, it sounded like you really don't have very much time to
No, you don't.
Yeah,
yeah, that's true. And, it used to be, we used to get booked a day ahead of time. So I would hear today about my bookings tomorrow afternoon. And because we were driving into the studios and everything was, it was at a slower pace. It was still crazy frantic, but it was at a slower pace. Yeah. Now that they can get any voice anywhere in a matter of seconds, just by calling an agent and saying, I need somebody now.
Yeah.
I need Joe now. I need Scott now. I need, Laurie now. Whatever it is, because of our instant connectivity, we have to be at the ready at any moment. So you don't get that script until right before the session. In fact, we may hook up and we haven't gotten the script yet. I'll say, geez, I haven't seen the script.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I sent that to you. Here you go.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Let's do it. So, you don't have a lot of time to prepare with the script.
Yeah.
But it's different than doing commercials, where you're creating a character and there's so much more involved.
Right.
I don't know if everybody would agree, but I think that, I guess it's because it's my skill set and others who do this all the time, that we're kind of like a quick study, you know, and you can see what they're going after. And there's usually direction from the writer-producer in the script. Might be a little something in there, or they've told something to the room producer to pass along what they're trying to, to do with the script, and then you just jump in and do it.
And of course, you're flexible, but they know what they're going to get when they hire Joe Cipriano. I mean, you've got a relationship with all these networks and things, haven't you? So, you've got that sort of baseline of quality that it's just tweaking it from that point.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it, and not just me, but all the men and women that do promo. They just know what they can do. The fun thing is when you can surprise them and do something different and say, hey, why don't we try this on that? And maybe it was something they hadn't thought of, and they're kind of, I didn't even know you could do that. They sound like that.
Yeah.
But then, conversely, I love it when you get direction to push you out of what you would normally do. You look at something, you go, oh yeah, I see what they want. They want this, that, and that. But then if the room producer or the writer producer says, you know what, why don't we try this? How about this? And it's like, whoa, okay, I never thought of that. That's fun when, you hear it later and you go, wow, I never would have thought of that, and how fun it was to be directed there to do it. So you have to be open, to take direction.
And when you're recording the session, obviously you're being directed live. So how many takes are you giving out, and how long is this session? For a TV promo?
It's pretty quick. We like I said, we do that first take is kind of the feel everything out, see how much time I have. Okay, I see that's the visual. Oh, and I see that this copy point matches what's coming up on the screen, so I have to say amazing when amazing is written on the screen. Yep. And so you do that first one, and then you do a second one. Pretty much you should be done. They might say ask for a third one, but on the third one, if for example it's a Monday spot, when they say T to B, that's top to bottom. Let's do a T to B, but let's do a tonight version. So whereas normally we would just pick up tags, just do the top and bottom, and just say, instead of Monday, you'd say tonight, next, tomorrow,
Yeah.
we'll do a full take, a T to B with a tonight. And then they're satisfied. Okay, we got 3 takes. We're covered. Let's just pick up the next tag and the tomorrow tag, and we're done. So
Right.
that's it. 3 takes would be that's a long session.
All these audiobook guys are just got their head in their hands right now.
Boy, I know about that. I don't know. Our own book that Ann and I wrote, Living on Air, Adventures in Broadcasting. I did the audio book, and wow, that is
It's a whole different world.
that's a lot of work and a lot of time.
I'm going to ask you about that book in a little while.
Yes.
So they're presumably recording on their end, and they're
Yes.
pretty much mixing straight away, and you're connecting via ISDN, Source Connect, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As soon as you're done, if maybe you have 3 spots to do, maybe you have 6, maybe you have 2, whatever the session is, and as soon as you're done, the mixer can then start mixing unless they have another read booked right after you. You know, and then a lot of times, in sweeps, it's just rotating voiceover artists. It's one after the other, and they don't have time to mix, and so maybe the night mixer who comes in doesn't have as many reads and has to go back to the afternoon spots and mix them.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about pickups? Is that something you record on your own and send in, or do they have to direct that?
No, we do hook up for that. They very, very rarely will say, "Can you send us an and and stuff instead of a then?" They hook up. The networks, that's just the way they work, and they just like to do it in the session. I guess they get they get the same sound.
Mm-hmm.
They know what's there. They don't have to. I think they would just rather have you on the line and direct you.
Yeah.
Cable networks might, say, hey, we missed a line. Can you send this in?
Yeah.
And we'll do that. And when I do syndicated, like if I'm doing The Simpsons syndicated package, which might be, 20 episodes, we do all that in one session.
Wow.
And it might be a 2-hour session, and there are 5 spots per episode. So, but a lot of them are... you read the 30, a lot of what you used in the 30 will work in the 20, unless there's a copy change, and then we'll pick that up. But they can move stuff down. And so you may end up reading the 30, maybe a line in the 20, a line in the 10, and then you read the 5-second one, and then you move on to the next spot.
Right.
It's it's quick-paced.
It's funny. It's this. I know we're getting super nitty-gritty here, but our audience for this podcast are going to eat this up. I just know it. So now, sticking with that theme for super anal, I want to get into the how the union plays into this stuff, because if they're promos for cable TV, this is considered by the union to be non-jurisdictional.
Right.
So they don't have set minimums and things like that. But that's not the case for network. So obviously you have an agent, and there's a lot of negotiation between the agent and the cable network. But do you have any part in the negotiation for the cable rates and things like that, or how does that work?
The agents, certain cable networks may just have already an established rate. This is what we do, and so that you're playing by that. But I do let my agent, Mary Ellen Lord and Jessica Belofsky, they do promo. That's what they do, know. And so they know what's going on. When you're doing network stuff and it's a union job, you're working on a scale. And, some people don't understand that Don LaFontaine, when he would do a network spot, he was making scale. He wasn't like scale and a half or double scale.
Right.
I mean, all of us work for scale.
Yeah.
And when it comes to trailers, well, that's a whole other thing. Then Don would have his rate, and I have my rate. My rate would be nowhere near Don's rate, So there's that whole hierarchy. But on the cable side, Mary Ellen and Jess, they negotiate that. If it's non-jurisdictional, then they'll come to me and say, okay, here's what they're saying. And then we'll talk about it, and maybe we'll go back and ask for a little bit more. And we do this. Yeah. We do this in radio imaging. We do it in syndication. We do it in a lot of non-broadcast stuff. While there's a scale, we always try to stick to what the union scale is, so that we never would want to undercut. You know?
You're in the ballpark.
So we do keep it. Oftentimes a lot of these cable networks and others, they just don't want to deal with what they perceive as being union paperwork and all of that, which truthfully isn't that bad.
No.
They don't like, listen, we'd rather pay you more money above scale just so we don't have to deal with that, So we'll oftentimes we'll run our own. We can use signatories and that way we get what the scale is plus the 10% for the agent plus the whatever the pension and welfare is for the union. We'll negotiate all of that and then we'll just create our own SAG-AFTRA report through a signatory and run it through the union that way. So that's like turning a non-union gig union is what we're always doing.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean,
the bells are ringing, ladies and gentlemen. That means that
it's the real world. We're not trying to pretend to be a little isolated, little hermetically sealed bubble here. Now we've got a couple more questions, and then we can wrap up. Do you do promos in other countries, and how do they differ if you do?
Well, with ESPN, they do run in other countries, but that's a negotiated rate with them, and they're based here. And I'm able to do that. They're non-union, but I'm able to do that because it is non-jurisdictional and running internationally. As far as I do work. I work for a few companies in the Netherlands, and they're always interesting because this company is kind of tied to Endemol and all of the game show, which I do a lot of game show work that I love. I do both live and recorded, but I do a lot of what's called sizzle reels, which is kind of like they have the concept of the show and they're selling it to a network or they're selling it to a vendor and they're selling it worldwide or they're selling it in the U.S. So I do have, in the Netherlands, I do these the most bizarre shows that some of them end up, running in the U.S. Like The Voice is a great example. The Voice started, I think, in Denmark or wherever it started and was more of a worldwide hit before it got here to the U.S. And, of course, it's a great U.S. hit. But I've seen a lot of shows that begin internationally and then end up here and vice versa. But so when we negotiate with them, we negotiate at the SAG level, for pricing for scale, and we'll actually get a little bit better than that, plus the 10% for the agent. And again, that's another situation where we'll use a signatory, a third party, and run that through the union. Right,
I see. And stylistically, I mean, presumably if they're hiring you, they want the American sound, So
they want the American sound. I've been told, several times that here and especially here in the U.S., they'll put me on a sizzle when they're going in to pitch a network because what they'll tell me is it already sounds like it's on the air when we put your voice on it.
Yeah.
So and I have one producer who uses me a lot, and he says, quite frankly, you're just good luck for us, But it does, they'll go in and they'll play it for them. Here's our concept. Here's what we've done. We've shot a pilot, and here's our sizzle, and I'm voicing it, and it sounds like, wow, this is already on the air on CBS or NBC, and so it gives them a little bit of a leg up,
Great. All right. So if everyone that's listening to this, well, not everyone, but if someone is listening to this and they desperately want to get into the promo world, what would your suggestion be for their first steps to, reach where you are now?
And you do. Everything has to be step by step, and I learned that, myself. Coming into this, it's hard to leap over steps. I mean, it happens, but it's really studying, and learning the craft, and even those YouTube videos that you were talking about, watching other talent working and seeing how things are done. It's so very important. So study, workshops, working with coaches is very, very important. And it's a step that cannot be skipped, and you shouldn't jump into doing a demo until you've really worked with some some coaches and you are at a level, because no matter what, you do have that. You don't want to mess up your first impression for either an agent, your representation, maybe it's a manager, or certainly, someone who is a buyer, a voice seeker.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very important to take that step by step and not be too anxious to get it all done immediately, Just working at it and understanding what the gig is very important.
And it sounds like what you were saying earlier, it's not quite so crucial these days that you have to be in an LA or an NYC to do this.
Not at all.
Yeah.
When Ann and I moved to Los Angeles, I wanted to pursue what I do, and you could only do it if you lived in LA. I mean, if you lived in New York, there wasn't a lot of entertainment network promos being done. They could maybe do sports and news there on a network level. But, it had to be here. And now that's what makes it – listen, it makes it so great for people that want to get into the business. You don't have to up and leave, a town where your family is or whatever else is keeping you there, and you can work from just about anywhere. I think the most important thing with that is you have to have representation that deals on that kind of level all the time. So as long as you're represented by – a franchised agent in New York or Los Angeles, you can live just about anywhere. Because truthfully, when I do a session for whomever, in L.A., and I'm in L.A., and I'm only 10 miles away from them or even 3 miles away from them, we're still hooking up on the same connectivity that somebody in Pennsylvania or Florida or Canada is using. So, it doesn't matter where you are physically. It's having the chops, being able to do, what they need, bringing them your talent, which, it always works to be unique and be yourself, because nobody else is doing that. And they're always looking for new voices and new talent. But the most important thing is having representation that can get you heard, and get you up for those gigs.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's fantastic. Before we sign off, why don't you tell us a little about where people can find out more about you, and tell us about your book as well?
Oh, well, thank you. JoeCipriano.com and is a place where you can go and read a little bit about me and hear what I do. I'm also on Facebook. I think I'm Joseph VO there.
Yep.
And as far as coaching, it was not something that I always thought that I would be good at. I don't think I'm so great at trying to impart what it is that somebody needs to do to color their read. I mean, there are so many great coaches, but what I do have a knack for is understanding the overall of a career and what your goals are and what are you doing to, set those goals and then follow up and move towards those goals. It's something that we all have a problem with. It's always at New Year's where you say, I'm going to do this. Right. I'm going to go to the gym every day. And it's the same thing with a career. And then it starts to fall off and you forget. So I like to keep people on track and remind them of what they're doing and show them where they can go. And then as far as coaching someone in promo and doing the promo master classes, I love doing those, because I like to work with a certain level of talent. I work with beginners, I work with intermediates, and talking about career and all of that. But when I'm doing a master class, I like to work with people that have gone through that, and they're right on the edge. They're just knocking on the door of network promo, and maybe they've had one or two. And when you get up to that level, I tell them when we do master classes, it's like an inch this way and a fraction this way, and it's a thought process, or it's a lift an eyebrow. I mean, it's so slight that can color and change your entire read. And for my master classes, I teach, and I also bring in people who work in the industry all the time, booking talent in the promo industry. And like Eric Poole, who does radio promos for networks, and Brett Wynn, who runs a company called The Refinery, and they do creative for all the networks and for movie trailers as well. And I'll bring a manager in. I'll bring an agent in because I want them to be able to read and learn from people who are working in the industry right now. It's good to work with a coach who is a voiceover coach and maybe isn't working in the industry, but they have that great knowledge of teaching. But when it comes to these master classes, I want them to interact with people that are working now, doing it today.
And where do you hold these master classes?
I'll do them at my home in Los Angeles, or I'll book a recording studio. The website for that is joeciprianoconsulting.com.
Okay.
And I also have a promo masterclass page that you can search, Joe Cipriano promo masterclass on Facebook, and you'll see things there. What was the other thing I was going to tell you?
The book?
Oh, yeah, that pesky book. Ann and I always wanted to do something with Ann. She's, like I said, she's an Emmy Award winner. She's a writer.
Wow, that's great.
She's going for her master's degree right now in media literacy, which is really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm her tech support.
Wow.
So, but we, when I came up, I would come up with certain ideas, and maybe, we would start on something that wasn't right. But when we came up with the book, talking about, my path through radio, my background, Italian American, my big family back in Connecticut. There are a lot of rich stories to tell, and also in broadcasting, there are a lot of interesting people in broadcasting, and voiceover as well. So we worked on it for 3 years, and it was so fun to do. We literally, what a great collaboration that was. We would write separately. But then I would write a chapter, send it to her, and she would make her changes and send it back to me. She liked sitting in her office at our home quiet. I would sit outside on the patio with music from whatever era we were writing about, 70s, 80s, 90s, and do it that way. So we had different styles. And it's a fun book. It's Living on Air, Adventures in Broadcasting. I've had some great reviews on it, really generous reviews. And but mostly it's kind of like people talk about the power of positivity is what comes through in the book.
Definitely.
And being positive and never giving up and being persistent. And that goes to your earlier question of how do you get into this business and how do you get to be successful in promo or anything. Besides the coaching and the learning and all of that, and not skipping those steps, it's never give up and be the most persistent person in the room. Yeah. And it's always those that are the last ones standing, You're going to get a lot more no's than you get yeses, and that's true for me today. It's never ending. So you can't let the no's get you down, Got to keep going.
What a fantastic way to end it. Thank you so much for all that information. I know we crammed an awful lot into a 45, 50-minute chat. Sorry it was so detailed in the middle, but I think...
But it's
considering
fun.
the audience, I think...
It's fun to talk.
Absolutely,
Thanks,
absolutely. Thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
So what a joy that was to talk to Joe. He's such a nice guy, so down to earth, and he's got some really, really interesting, fun stories there. Who knew about the 416, how that came to be? And of course, Joe's story was really interesting, how he came up from radio and his mentors and the importance of mentoring. And yeah, that was such a fun interview, and Joe's such a fun guy. So thank you, Joe. That's it for this episode. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, bye. Thank you to this week's guests, to our sponsor J. Michael Collins and Backstage Magazine. Thanks also to Kyle Marie Colucci and Chris Sharps for social media support. Join us next time for another class.